Good evening, YouTubers. This is Kelly Bear. This is my first streaming video. Well, it's not a streaming video, it's a recorded video, but I'm going to read to you an essay I wrote about divination and fixating your thoughts to visualization on perceived inability of people can get through the head with like manipulation of the divine, the unconscious mind, and racing thoughts and such. Basically, perceive life as a cup, and your cup will fill and fill and fill and fill. There's a way to basically make it so you're always exceeding and prevailing in racing thoughts or whatever you want to make it to. So I'm going to start by reading my essay I wrote, and I wrote in a night. Here it begins. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything that was made. In him was life, and then the light of man. Merely anything in any belief was and always will be the way it is. Some say us as man are merely peons to the coexisting factor of being slaves to our own devices. Due to any equivalent understanding as God himself and his creation would necessarily mean that the purpose of life is a genetic imprint of how we at any moment have a major epiphany, like natural selection or behavioral adaptations. What could be the sign of such archetype? Here, I'm going to mention a book by Richard Tarnas, Cosmos and the Psyche. It readily depicts epiphanies of great success and coordination of the Prometheus as the underlying factor of personal reference, being like astrology and zodiac symbols, being genetic and omnipotent. And the Copernicans, that's further than the astrology. It's the planetary revolution of being able to see planets naked, not visible by the naked eye. Copernican's theory over exceeding the cause and nature of events and prevailing symbiosis of man and progression, being in such syncosity of Pluto and Saturn. But actual realization of such in both areas is a coexistence where a certain person can be able to understand the relationship to the almighty forces of cause and effect. It is possible to deliberately decipher the encrypted messages of the material world in the exceeding future. In an essay by Plato, he comes to the excellent point of understanding that one must become extraordinary and must not be disgruntled to bring either messages from the future to predicting the future, and must be amusing to the primordial needs of life to exhibit prophecy. Now, that's pretty self-explanatory. What on earth could possibly be the primordial needs of exceeding life? The meaning of life can mean many different types of people probably, but through the many years of generations has spawned many thoroughly idealist proactivists. May it be a medical trait or a repetitious sign of self-preservation, and possibly many more. But I'm sure this is a procreative assignment through what might be a personal delusion, but many people searching for answers suffer from. Case in point, where's God today? Is he in our hearts? Is he somewhere encased in ideation of where intuition are? Or even adverse of? Is God good? Is he pure? Is he pretentious? Is he truly what humankind needs in our time of needs? If he is, why is he so well hidden? Like, seriously, if he is exactly what people need in their times of need, truly deserve in their times of sorrow, or in needs of uplifting, why is he so drastically misunderstood? I'm sure there are even own encounters with spiritual needs in men's, along with epiphanies, but really, what is the case of such details? Not everyone has lived the exact same lives or by the same endeavors, so what really makes the universe intelligent design? The one and most common thing that arrives in my mind of what typical individual is that they adhere in almost specific ways to the probability. It just seems right in the time of events. They act the way they react in certain situations. To a specific situation, what does it take to make someone become perspective in any case or scenario? Is it unwillingly compelled? Is it fear of rather being completely timid, too alternative? Feel that asphyxiation alternatively narrows the chances, or to appeal in a moment in persuasive manner to enlighten someone by the means of altercate what is best and visual, basically manipulation. Are people truly given free will in an ill manner for people to be short-tempered, rude, obnoxious? If so, why is God considered to be a perfect God? What are the other interpretations of an all-seeing God? One thing, pagan sacrifice is one of the most devised and taboo manner of ritualistic mantles. Muslims most high esteemed God is one that referred to eat the heads of demons, which is rather impractical and rather obvious beneficiary needs of what humanity may be proved upon, with righteousness being shorthanded at tyranny. Buddha, the means of enlightenment under the most impervious matters of life, does exist or will not, as much as the problem will be rendered if you don't believe it. It is at any time applicable that by any means we as a community are in need of a consideration of us being replicate of what the perfect chance of a follower or procreate a visionary. Sounds more like a personal prophecy of the highest respectable mannerism where us as ourselves can be in a significant happiness. Where is it possible that man can have the chance of limitless perception? Okay, here's a call sign that seemingly enhances the foresight of the unseen. It goes like this. Goes like that. It's a rather curious thing I have come upon, an interesting individual and astral among other things, but this symbol stood out to me the most, rather uplifting and tedious to acquire this gift among other things. Again, I don't know what call sign that does, but it does increase the chances of hallucinations. Among other things, I've encountered this in a component in a procreative, non-materialistic form of actual bachelors of a mundane of man. Okay. Is what people really fear is the knowing of what they don't want to know, or the idealistic nature of where man can understand the truth of the places riddled in their mind where once they were troubled to withstand anything, why anything bad or overall natural enhancement can be easily deciphered, Or is it a occurring gift upheated by people capable to appear to this natural anomaly? Or is it rather in Plato's obvious superstition of what makes a prophet? Next to the Illuminati, who perniciously raise calves to slaughter in the sign of the divination of natural occurrence around the world as rather perpetual in coincidence, the anomaly of divination is truly a curious subject for all people, but divination is obviously a byproduct of the words divine and the objective ending shin, which apparently represents there's an action in the word it is a context with. So context of the divine message from beyond. But why is all technically demigods? Why is this so persuaded by members of... I skipped a line. But why is there people with the blood of the divine among us? Is not Jesus, Dionysus, the royal sheik of India, all technically demigods? In ideation-wise, demigods. So why is there persuaded by members of the occult or spiritual speculators is in an applicable manner more suited to more casual humans? Christianity is basically the world's largest religious movement and does not uphold in any sort of profane manner, but it is inexhaustible meanings of what is acceptable among many other mainstream foundations of spiritual foundation, which is true. Along with also many of people are remedial in many pervasive and more ferocious manner in any of the mainstream religions, such as Christianity. Occult taboo and abnormalities decipher the Bible in many backwards unorthodox methods, such as abuse, mind control, polygamy, and most notoriously spiritual apprehension, as well as Christianity spawning the birthing pod of many outbranches. It also has this counteracting oppositional side which subsides with Satanism, or the worship of the devil, which is completely under the conspiracy of anyone subsides the better side of the paradigm shift. And under a lot of non-unjustifying criticisms of occult survivors, of whistleblowers, but Satanism is one of those things that anyone who is will to coexist with the actuality, they'll have to admit it is also bad and good due to the fact what we admit is to adhere one of God's greatest prophecies, the existence of evil, and is evident to always exist. 1 second. Okay, among all certain distastes of the mainstream and what can be considered taboo, there's a lot of certain things that will always attract a certain mind frame of where you can willingly want to be a part and compelled to have a certain distaste of such perspectives acquired in their life. It's like being raised to follow a certain way of rules. Is a consideration, or much more, to be a deviant opposite condescending, sorry, which is amongst all things a spectral graphing of what we want to perceive. What need to be perceived and where we feel fit in a long life. The last little bit of a previous sentence is the most fragile of the topic, for we could very well not be a fault of preoccupying reinstatement, nor being capable of recognizing the emotional backlash of the output-input of the obvious self-constructing manifest of the world, human interactions, or any interactions for that matter. A man, woman, with all have their various interactions of the world becoming their life story, and behind the truth behind it is that we are able to coexist with all residual crossfiring of different analog natures consistently overlaying the self-constructing, reforming personal conduit. Okay, just imagine this in your head. There's life above death, and on the other hand, there's death above life. Life's prerequisites are death, and death is mediation is life, along with life's mediation being death. And life's prerequisites is death, and death's prerequisites is life. So with this assimilative graph of obviously the adoration of what is seemingly fate, God's will, we can almost abruptly be able to antagonize the most uprooting of anything comprehensive of the basic criteria of the natural balance of the world. We live, we die, people die, more live. So with what as people are going to be able to elaborate in life is this very nature of cause and effect. So we can adhere to the meditation of the procreative mediation of our life on this self-enduring assembly line. They're almost a gravitational actualization that life will force you into a path of rigid outcomes to fornicate the lives you impact, an exceeding trauma of displacement and almost prevailing opportunists. Now, if evil is the plan of all that is perfect, is not goodness in every moment God seizing the day? Think about it. So where is the divine in our lives with that being said? Is it not in the schematic of where the path less walked upon basically the multiple motions a person feels on a daily basis? Or does it have to be the way we reflect upon reasoning to procreate innuendos through modern circumstances, manipulation, and basically seizing the day, if you mean by physical or materialistic manner? To proclaim the self-actualization is a visionary moment that the adoration will subside in the coming time. So where on earth does the actual knowledge of all matter of things become ever relevant? Through times of mediation? What is more of a term for a skeptical bombardment is the willingness and determination to acquire such transcendence is to elaborate in the circumstances outside of the run-of-the-mill needs of such as want and need. For someone to ever succeed, they have to change their ways, otherwise they would have already been successful. Basically, I wrote that. I like that. For instance, is a single creation of what is always perfect and post-mortem. Is it philosophically impossible and to prophesize of St. Paul in Revelations? Is literally just the tip of the iceberg if it was going to happen inevitably. So where in this is the end of days? Is it an assessment of the higher divine of the pagans are capable of divination and spiritual apprehension? Where is there, so to speak, end of days? Is it spiritual death or superstition or substitution? Okay, sorry. To many people, religion is the biggest abomination. But quite literally, it is a self-examination of the life after and before. And every nook and cranny in between. So if there is so many regimes of life, where is the actual gratuity? Is it a three-person? Is it that the person themselves is life and death that surrounds them? If that's the case, where is life's everlasting post-coordinated lifestyle, like life after death? So if we ourselves are embodiment of God, where are the means, end, and justification mean? Is it in fact the silver linings between life and death? Where is his internal and hidden beyond everyone's reach, right between the prerequisites and mediations, literally becoming the masters of fate and in the highest esteem of reality? So if a person were able to make an actuated measurement, it could possibly mean that they themselves are about to be conceived, are alive and undead. Basically, if you want to become God, you have to be alive and dead, which is quite literally by any means against all circumstances and incompatible thinking unless you're mentally ill. So who does a person be able to have to access being able to any sort of manipulating the already formally announced physical world? Could it actually be a cause of supreme overseer capable appeal the world as an envision? Is a classification of postmortem the adolescence of the mind enchantress? Are we ourselves the only true ruler of any circumstances that we may afflict on our inner salvation? We absolutely are. It's like the old saying, we shall reap what we have sown, which is exactly the opposite of taking others for granted, which is impeded by every act of religion. Okay. Where's the settlement and stabilizing method? Professed change to underestimate the action seems to be actually the answer. Pretty much, if you want to procreate an analogy for yourself, which is probably sugarcoating because people don't like to judge themselves. It's true. But it is actually prolong the course of adequate prerequisites. To utter the enduring fact in nature is easily an understatement. Over both prevailing sides are equally relevant, and the cause of the mention is actually in fact the obstacle in question. Life is at the most sustaining factor of all time, for it is all we ever known. It is true if you go for perception. Thus, as a certain abstinence, creation is merely the ultimate disenchanting remedial mention of what's so easily challenged. Yeah, like life's easily challenged through creationism. If life is in fact devised in a polygenic format, then creation is most certainly life, for all we discover alien elements across numerous space explorations. So if life's devised by a rhythmic nature of compatibility, is that not how everything sustainable means are met? Oh, this is a big one. If life is literally deluded by the pretentious means of dismay of actualization of the persuaded misguidance, we ourselves may actually be individually at risk of self-spiritual apprehension, which I strongly believe in. This, of all things, is something not a few people are willing to be anti-susceptive to, but to be preordained to and actually be the default user of misinterpreting. People are proud. Pride's the most self-deluding factor, because you'll always be proud, and you'll never really come to a self-actualization that you may have done wrong, and it could be over-deluding. It's self-defeating, really, which I decipher pride as always misinterpreting and not feeling resentment in your actions. It just destroys a person. The relevant eluding factor of where divinity itself may lie is the equivalent heretic reassurance that people may hold in a pervasive manner against one another. For when we are not compatible with what we misunderstand, it becomes a source for being disdained. But one shall always be trying to apprehend one's true integral hierarchy and counter the abnormalities, like controlling people, such as turning progressive failure into an opportunistic means to move on in life, such as prevalence to acquire sustainable healthy epiphanies. In order to redirect your any self as a magnetic attraction such as personal output, you may be able to open all with withstanding chakras while maintaining a fixed position in astral guidance. Positions such as freeing your mind and proactively envisioning yourself sitting on your chest while concentrating all your free will on positive enhancement of where you seek improvement. This is a great way to balance yourself and yearning for gratitude. It is also a great way to negate negativity or other people trying to mess with you in a spiritual manner is you astral to the top of your chest and you focus there. You just focus on, you sit on yourself really, and it helps with that sort of stuff. The most predominant self-enduring is to be the inability for one person to actually evase of second-guessing and open-minded paranoia when dealing with trying to enhance one's own observation skills. So you may not catch second wind of false negative reflections, so you may be more objective to anti-systematic self. So you may actually be able to protect your own uniqueness against the self-righteousness that people openly antagonize, thus being able to perfect the refraining for self-destructive negligence and proceeding in the more prerequisite manner in a more compatible alignment. Oh, this is a big one. I can't believe I wrote this one night, honestly. I was just drinking coffee all night, smoking cigarettes, you know how it goes. The obviousness of the most intellect design is though that one may be concurrent and even more precisely be relevant, if not more adequate than an almost mystifying adjacent reference, but not symmetric. But more as a pure definitive abdication to empowers one's free will. A lot of these epiphany encoded series of events can come and may come from many different resources that affect people in different ways. Some say that it's a gift from God to actually have such a beautiful moment of clarity, and very well could be. Some momentous are bluntly obvious from the distinctive of water displacement theory, like evaporation, cycles round and round. And the world famous discovery of Newton's law. But more in a play of a self-grounding situation. The freedom you uphold from yourself in any prediction must often afflicted not by times of sorrow, but by pure adoration of life itself. For life will never fail you, because it is all in our hearts still beating. It's just for you, and it's all for you, just as a blessing of your family. Self-preservation may be inexhaustible resources, but it is merely excess subconscious for one to be immersed in the predominant sense of gratitude and ever hoping ever better tomorrow, and you may be able to control your outcome today. But your actions will change tomorrow, as reference in an inaudible reference of case of effective vibrations and mediations by more appealing the prerequisites in any favorable workings of inner enhancement. For instance, imagine a web chart, a web graph. Okay, just imagine a web graph, bubbles, lines, center, all connected to the center. For instance, a sample integral chart is merely but a fraction of how much there is simplicity and desires of preordained that must exhibit the further it reaches out, and more functions of the functioning coherent persona alembic. Basically, you are basically what's the word? You are a giant chemistry of yourself. You are at work with interactions and experimenting with yourself all the time. You are basically an alembic. Within us as intelligent beings, as a pre-required megalithic foundation on society, today we have a couple ways of exceeding personal prevalence, such as primal world explanation. We are part of the world, so it shapes us who we are. And the other being modern world explanation, as we ourselves being the center of our own worlds and affecting the world around us. As a certain explanation, imagine us in a game of Ring Around the Posy, such as the individually falling down, as a certain part of the song is that we do in fact all fall down. So in a decisive matter, as well, all being in the made of the image of God, is he in fact among us? Or are we in a certain pervasiveness of where intuitively only recognize the parts of civilization meeting the criteria that we could use one? But there is no intention of us probably being in any sorts grasping his concepts. Thus we only use references of God as an implicated religion, have strived to see the light at the end of the tunnel. A systematic connection of self-release and intuitive responsibility along the common denominator of the only inner affliction is a level of reflection of self-sustenance could be the part of involving ourself to being coordinating in a way to envelop a sense of premeditative significance in developing a certain goal in life. The metaphysic of the world of the unseen may be unoccupied by yesterday's obstacles, but may not have a futuristic reference ensued by post-secondary ripple effect events based on particle resettling theory, which is basically water evaporation. Water settles and evaporates and it goes to the bottom and it becomes water again, not gas. But that is pretty much only about the essay I wrote. I'm probably going to do something again like this. Just got to write another one. And yeah, thank you. This is Kelly Bear, and I'm out.